You're listening to the Cheeky Clinic podcast. I'm Dr. Chris Delp.
And I'm Cat Parker-Delp, owner of Duluth Med Spa.
If you've arrived at a point in life where good enough is simply just not good enough for you, you're in the right place.
Here we cover topics like sexual health and wellness, hormonal balance, and body optimization. And we deliver to you lessons from our travels from hard-to-get-to places around the world.
We are so excited you're here to venture off the beaten path with us into the taboo, where no subject is off limits.
Welcome to the Cheeky Clinic. Let's dive in.
We got some interesting feedback from the orgasm gap and talking about learning about the orgasm gap. And that made me ask you, how did you get your sex education when you were growing up?
And I feel like sex education is so, what I got is so outdated, I guess you would say. I grew up in the Bible Belt. So everything that I learned about sex, I think that I kind of had to figure it out. Looking back on it,
By field testing
it, exactly. But I feel like it was always, in my household, it was a subject nobody talked about. I don't think my parents ever sat down and gave me any kind of sex talk at all. It would be an awkward subject and a taboo subject. I think that it was, sadly, sex ed is taught, at least from my experience, and I think it is probably most of the country's experience, that sex ed was not taught how to have pleasurable sex. Sex ed was all about either avoiding it, not getting STDs, or not getting pregnant. So abstinence was basically sex ed, which is so sad. It's really, I think my first memory of sex ed type of things were the boys would be separate from the girls, and the boys would have their talk, and the girls could have their talk. I think that was probably around 5th grade, maybe. And that was always kind of like the little whispers of what did they do, and then in high school, if I recall, I think our health class was also considered sex ed and health, but there was anything about sex being a positive experience. I think I learned as a little kid, if sex is going to be painful, your first time's going to hurt. All those were the things that were ingrained in me as a child, or just in general of what I was brought up to believe. Stay away from it. You should be a virgin when you get married. There was a lot of conversation like, I felt like women were the gatekeepers of the vagina, and men were,
knocking at the door.
Knocking at the door. And so I just think that it's been such a, it was a confusing time for a young girl. I can remember one thing that just really cracks me up growing up learning was that whoever you sleep with, whoever they slept with before you, now you have slept with all of those people. Like that was literally taught to me as a child. Like whoever you sleep with, if they slept around, then now you've slept with that many people. And it is so absolutely absurd to think about that, but that was truly what was ingrained. And it was a horrible thought process. And it was scary, and you didn't want to make a bad decision. And I think that it just should be looked at in a positive light. Sex is pleasurable. Sex is something you can enjoy.
But if you tell the kids that, then they're going to have sex.
Right? But you just got to teach them the right things about sex. In the Netherlands, I believe they are, their sex education, from what I've been reading about, starts in preschool. Literally in preschool. They are taught, they are just, it's a natural part of their process. They have lower um, pregnancy rates, they have lower STD rates, um, but they touch on all aspects of sexuality and not just this is the pregnancy factor. The P, in the V, sex, and it's going to be horrible. But yeah, I feel like it is, the abstinence only approach is should not be taught. I think that that is just
Well, I think when you dive into a lot of the research, the areas of the country in which the abstinence-only approach is um, the the focus, they do have higher teen pregnancy rates and higher STD rates. It duplicates the Netherlands study very well. Although that being said, as an emergency physician, um, uh, to caution my son, I did take a little bit of the fear-based approach. I I said, just so you know, there's a guy in your high school who had unprotected sex, and his penis fell off.
that's horrible, horrible.
Just to make sure that
Did
he
you
was
scare him?
yes, he was cautious, and of course he believed me. My credibility has maintained despite me not being so credible from time to time on those things. But for from my aspect, I was raised in Guatemala and Mexico, and
And you did some Catholic schooling too.
yes, and there,
So
yeah.
what was that
I,
experience like?
well, being the most central figure in all of Catholicism is the Virgin Mary. So it was like that was the prize that you virginity was the single prize thing. So I didn't get any sex education whatsoever, not a single word. My mom put a book. What's the book that women get about?
We get a Judy Blume book
Yeah,
that got something about Margaret or something. I
yeah.
think that's something like that,
There
but
was
yeah.
something. There's an equivalent for guys that just appeared on my bookshelf one day, without any word at all. Um, so now, fast forward, it plays into that expectation, since I didn't learn anything about sex whatsoever, but there's still an expectation that I should know everything because it's natural. Eh,
Right, and I think that, I mean, a lot of that is not even taught to sit and talk to even patients about sex is just not really taught. I think that, sex education should be something that is evolving from the time you are a young child through adulthood. I mean, our sex lives change, our bodies change, our hormones change. Um, Sex in your 40s is different than your 20s. How to explore things, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. Sex education is really, it should not be something um, that is looked at shamefully. I think that the way most of us, at least the way I was raised at, is it was looked at more of a shameful thing than versus something that you enjoyed.
I think that's more of a women experience.
I agree. I think it probably is.
Because guys didn't have that same thing, because you've got that weird balance where um, if you like sex,
You're a
you're
whore.
you're a
Yep.
slut, and if you don't like sex, you're frigid.
Yep.
And so where do you go from there?
Right.
Eh,
Right. And you just
you,
you don't
you
have you
lose
don't know, you're
lose.
a lose-lose. You're a lose-lose for
So,
sure.
so if there's one thing that you could have went back and told yourself, because we're talking about two different things. What do you tell your kids? What should they know? And then what should you do as an adult? So what would you tell yourself
You
as a,
know,
a kid?
I did not really talk to my kids much about sex either. I certainly do now. There's no issue having that conversation now. But I didn't really talk to them about it because that was the way that I was raised. Um, I think that I just raised them and that it was uncomfortable. It was always an uncomfortable topic in our household. Um, So, yeah, I think that if I could change things, um, just to be a little bit more open about it, and sex is not just about something you wait for to marriage. I mean, people are getting married now much later in life. So you want these people to remain a virgin until they're 35, 40 years old. It's absolutely absurd. Sex should be enjoyable, um, feel good, something that you're comfortable with, something you're comfortable talking about, something you're comfortable talking to your partner about. Um, People that are raised with it being a shameful thing are probably not as comfortable talking about what feels good to them as somebody who's a little bit more open and understanding about sex is not just about getting pregnant. It's not just about wanting to have children. It can be sex can be just purely pleasure, and
So,
that children need to understand, or growing up need to understand that sex can be a pleasure sport. It can be a pleasure sport. It's not just a sport to get pregnant. It's a pleasure sport. You're getting a lot of protein as well.
yeah. So, what you wish that somebody would have just told you? The one thing that when you were 17, um,
I
16,
wish
15.
that somebody would have told me that it's okay and it's natural. The what you're feeling, the hormones that you're feeling, the desires that you're feeling is normal. It is normal to want to explore that. Um, I was the girl that when I did go get on birth control pills in high school, um, my boyfriend drove me. We went to the Planned Parenthood, and um, I was so afraid that my parents were going to find out that I literally hid them in the back of my speakers. So, like the big boombox speaker, the big speakers that stereos had, I unscrewed the back of them, and then I kept my, 6-month supply that Planned Parenthood gave you, and I had those stuffed shoved in the back of my speakers, and then I, only had to hide the one little pack, monthly, and then I would, because I didn't have anywhere to put it, and I knew my parents were gonna, my mom was gonna go through all of my things. And so, yeah, I mean, I was that terrified of thinking sex was this horrible thing. And I just wish that I could have been taught that sex is pleasurable. You should enjoy this as part of the hierarchy of needs. We talk about the hierarchy of needs, and that's part of it is just ignored a lot of times in families, and I think that I wish that I would have been taught that it's okay to feel this way and it's normal, and you should be encouraged to explore that. Yeah.
And being a physician, I didn't have any shyness in discussing it with my kids. Just my only focus was to prevent disease.
Yeah.
And I've a wonderful colleague, and he was tasked to talk to a couple of kids that were going camping, and they were in their late teens, and the expectation was to put that fear of sex into them. And his tack was completely different. He was like, let's just talk about what's going to kill you. Drinking and driving will kill you. If you have sex, yeah, we can deal with that. Let's prioritize what the important things were, and it was a very refreshing way for. He went just down on the list on the things that will kill you just based on the odds, and sex was at the very very bottom
Yeah,
of that.
there's a lot of things that are gonna kill you. Sex is you could actually enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. So that was quite a change there. So in terms of adult education, part of this, in our previous lectures, we were talking about how on if you go on the street of New York and interview 20 guys, only one out of 20 could correctly identify a clitoris on a diagram. And I thought, so where do you go for once you're interested in actually getting some education? Uh, Physicians, sometimes not so much, especially in the
Playboys, that's what we saw as kids. That's
yeah.
where our sex education was, our dad, the hidden playboys.
Mhm. And so now as an adult, where do you get your
Well,
sex
now
education?
I feel like now, there's internet, a lot more internet-based things, Yeah, I don't know. I think that it is hard for people that were taught to suppress that. I think that that's a
Do you think
hard topic.
the younger generation is it's a lot more easier for them to talk about it than when with your generation?
I think that that I think that there's a lot of differences in that. I mean, back I feel like in the younger generation when I was in high school, everything was just like binge drinking party, binge drinking. It's not really a thing now. I don't think binge drinking for teenagers is like this huge not like it was for us in somebody's parents' field with a bonfire and a keg. So I feel the same way about, um, sex. I think it is probably a little bit more discussed, with kids now because there's more information for them. I don't know that they're all getting that information from their parents or from a sex education course, but I think there's a lot more education and openness and willingness to learn about it out there now than there was 40 years ago.
Yeah,
I would think.
yeah. I'm curious. Since I didn't get any
You got
whatsoever,
none.
I.
So did they ever hand out did they ever separate the boys and girls and give the deodorant out and, the girls got a pad, you never got the deodorant, anything like that?
Nope.
Yeah, when you start
Still don't have any
still
deodorant.
don't have any of that.
No, this is a kind of a unique American thing that I'm not familiar with
Yeah.
in your schools.
And now you can find actual adult, sex ed getaways. You can there's places that you can go like an adult sex ed, um, camp, retreat, to get more comfortable in your sexuality with your partner, and I find that pretty
Uh,
interesting.
what site were you on?
But yeah, I think that there needs to be a lot more I think sex is from early on until late in life, it changes and, your bodies change, and to be able to talk about what makes good sex versus it being a fear-based thing is huge. Yeah.
So I think you've come a long way from being in
The
the Bible
frigid.
Belt, not mentioning sex except for fear, to now being an advocate.
Right, I'm an advocate for sex.
uh, but those intimacy retreats, for that, I think at least in my generation, men knew, or
They knew about it.
well, they knew we all assumed. Everybody assumed that we were the experts in sex, even with no training. And
So what do you wish you knew what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were younger? If you
um,
learned nothing, if you had no education on it, what do you look back on and say, "I wish I knew that about sex?"
Um, since I didn't have any education, I wasn't afraid of it. But I think that making it, knowing what the woman's experience is, so that I could make it better. I think that that was completely clueless. How do you enhance just part of being a partner? And that's true in my regrets in terms of what should I have learned in a relationship?
Right.
Sex is a part of the relationship. So how do you be a better
Partner.
boyfriend, girlfriend?
Yep.
How if you're in a partnership, how can you be better?
Right.
And I had no idea what the woman's experience was like, and had no idea how to improve that.
And I think it would be important to have that as part of sex education growing up is to learn all of the details about pleasuring yourself, your partner. All of these things are normal. It shouldn't be something that is looked at in if you sleep with that person, you've slept with everyone they've slept with mentality, because that's fear based, and I think that just it's not going to help anything.
So, are you a big enough advocate where you might be starting one of these
Or
sex
sex retreat,
retreats?
wouldn't that be something?
Next evolution for you? Would you be comfortable with that?
I think that would be fun.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like Certainly from where I was in prior life, prior times of my life, very comfortable now with sex and talking about sex and trying different things and just to know that we're all humans are just interesting creatures. What is it that you always say? We're
Our
our
species
species
is
is
a wonderfully curious species,
right. Uh,
and I use that frequently and with complete honesty.
right.
There are things that starting with when a toddler comes in and they put a little race car up their nostril. And it starts right there. We're
Yep.
just like,
We're curious
yeah,
people.
curious things.
Yeah.
Starting from the very, very beginning, we do funny things to ourselves because we're curious.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that and continuing that process. But I've always been being I think part of being a physician is you're not shy about a lot of those subjects.
I think there
But
are some that are shy of it. I think that there are some that are shy of it.
well, certainly not in the ER.
Not in the ER, they see it
Yeah,
all, right?
no, we see way too much. But with your evolution, I'm glad you finally got over all of uh,
Yeah.
those terrible sex education classes that you had to. s-
Endure or
s-
lack thereof,
So
lack thereof.
you guys, got like swag bags in sex ed with deodorant
I think
and
we got like
tampons.
deodorant and no, we didn't get a tampon. We got a pad, deodorant. I think that was, yeah, we had a swag bag, sex swag bag.
This is so interesting to me.
We watched a movie. I don't remember. Yeah, we watched a movie too. I don't remember. It was more about, um, the where babies come from kind of movie thing, but nothing ever, ever, ever about sex being pleasurable. It
Yeah,
was just
just
ingrained.
biologicals.
Yep, just biological, strictly biological, nothing emotional, um, and that was it. And then you don't talk about it at home, and that's just how you went on about your life. Yeah,
In med
yeah.
school, we got and I'm sure the physicians that are my age out there probably all got the same movie as part of our sexual education. And it was a movie of two, um, uh, I'd say elderly, but now they probably were my age, but two elderly people having sex. And the whole idea is that sex is something that you part of the sex education is that it should be pleasurable throughout your entire life. And we watched basically a porn film of all the adaptive strategies for older people to have sex. And it's funny that in retrospect, they said they were elderly, but they weren't too much older than me.
Your
Uh,
adaptive measures.
yeah, I'll see if I can pull that video up and we
Yeah.
can watch it together.
Anyways, well, I feel like it should be discussed more with children. And just from the, my kids, they were never the kids that, you got to go pee pee or your pee pee hurts or whatever. They were the penis and the vagina. We did use the correct terminology with my kids growing up. But I don't think I even got that. I don't think I think it was always, your pee pee, your private part.
Yeah, it
Um,
was always clinical.
yep,
Uh,
always clinical. Yeah.
and when I was educating my own son about sperm coming out of the penis, little tadpoles, and he was listening very intently to all of this. And when I got done, he jumped up and went running down the stairs where his older sister was and said, Sydney, guess what? I have leeches that come out of my penis. It's a little shy of the mark. But I'm going to look forward to if you decide to do an intimacy retreat at
Wouldn't
some
that be
point.
something?
Yeah.
That would be
Well,
something.
let's put your comments below, and we'll see if you can encourage Kat to do something like that.
All right.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us on a cheeky adventure through the world of wellness. Follow our spicy tips, laugh out loud stories, and expert advice designed to keep you feeling youthful, vibrant, and always in the loop.
Follow the show so you don't miss a beat. Stay connected, and let's keep the fun going.
And if there's a subject that you'd like to hear more about, please let us know. You can connect with us by clicking the contact link below or send us a message on social media.
Make sure to send this episode to a friend who could benefit from today's topics. And don't forget to leave the show a 5-star review.
Thanks for listening to The Cheeky Clinic. We'll see you in the next one.